Hello and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Domingo.
And I'm your co-host, Virginia Grenier.
We'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some inspiring conversation. Here at Language of the Soul, we know that life is story. Individually, we're the products of the stories we tell about ourselves. Culture is the amalgamation of the stories we weave about the human condition. Here's the thing. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. Thanks for tuning in and joining in the march toward human potential. Hi, guys, and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a very special episode today, and I've said that many times, but I couldn't mean it more. Some of you may have heard René Urbanovich on previous episodes. She's one of our favorite guests, and only in part because she's my dear sister. So I'm going to start by reading her bio. It's probably the same one, at least in the last episode during which we featured her. But she can correct it. Talking about her in the third person until I bring her in from the green room. She can correct it if I get anything wrong. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, René Urbanovich is a leading voice and creativity instructor in the Los Angeles area, having coached singers from television, film, and the Broadway stage. René's vocal technique is now on her YouTube channel, Voice Teacher Reacts, where she's extended her audience to the tens of thousands. She's a humanities through the arts professor, a poet, and an award-winning author. René is a TEDx speaker, has given workshops and spoken at venues such as SAG-AFTRA, Art Center College of Design, Osborne Head and Neck at Pepperdine, CTN, and many more. After a vocal injury left her voiceless, she went on to heal and earn a degree in creativity and search for the answers that would not only solve her personal dilemma, but feed into the collective search for meaning. Welcome, René Urbanovich.
Hello, thank you. Yes, that was right on.
Okay. Yeah, I know there's always something new. I guess straight out the gate, I have noticed you downplay, you downplay the body of work you've created in the literary realm. You tend to go, I'm a new author. I'm kind of green. I only have one novel out there. And I just want to say, I have a list here somewhere, between Sextilette and was it Carolyn's Story? Is that the name of it?
Yeah.
And Silence Broken and Now Dreaming and Solicited.
Mm-hmm.
You're a seasoned writer, René. So that wasn't included in the bio. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I don't put my writing in my bio yet. I don't know why, but I did write a book that did get an award from Writer's Digest. No small, tiny,
No, that's very well respected. Sorry for my memory. Which one won the Writer's Digest award?
The Creativity Conundrum Connection.
Oh, that I see. I didn't even mention that. Yeah, well, that's nonfiction. Maybe that's why I didn't go there.
Yeah,
but there you go. Yeah, you've got the accolades, man. Own it.
Well, and when I get buried, you can put all my little books in there on top of me, because it's weird how you can have 4 kids and all their partners and grandkids and be this mom and teacher to hundreds of students over the years, but really and truly, I want to be buried with my literature that I wrote.
Well, thanks for telling me that. Somehow I don't think I'm going to outlive you, but I will take a note. And I feel the same way. Even my self-published works, I just want them in print for posterity.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about legacy, right? This book is largely about legacy.
Right.
But for me, it's like, I just want it in print. As I was telling you in the green room, all illustrators have lost hours of work and learned the hard lesson of backing up. You've got to back up. So I'm just kind of a freak for backing up, if that makes sense. And even if the pieces aren't that polished, I get them in print. So yes, if I die, someone will find them in my apartment after finding my body.
There's something there, isn't it? And it's true. This whole book is about legacy. So yeah, okay. That being said, I'm glad you relate on that level, because you can't. It's hard to strip everybody down to the essential part that makes them Nick or that makes them René. But the writing is. There's just something about your own writing that it just is like your soul. I don't know.
I agree. You know, I think people, yeah, everybody experiences a different version of you, right? And it's
Mhm.
through their lens. But I think your writing is the only expression of your soul. And, you know, one time you told me about letter forms. Like when you were little, you would picture letters. Do you remember that?
That they had personalities.
Right. Like who the hell? I would never have guessed my sister, you know what I mean, had that kind of that particular kind of imagination. That's something we shared. That there's like this metaphysical realm you tap into. Like that's something that's so uniquely you. Do you know what I mean? That I could only know in that case because you told me. But I think sometimes our writings reveal things others couldn't possibly know through their lenses.
Exactly. And that's why to have your own friends be your beta readers, sometimes it's counterproductive and sometimes, it works great. So yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
in that spirit, you know, when we discuss your book, which I can't wait to get to, yes, that's the danger. Is I know you so well. We have a lot of shared territory when it comes to the literal content of the book. The same affinity for the characters, the same love of the desert. So for our readers, I don't want to fall into the trap of getting too into you had to be there stories or what do you call it, like inside jokes. I
right.
want to make sure to provide the context for literally everything we're going to discuss. So straight out the gate, I'm going to ask you to read a synopsis of the book so there is context. But before that, I want to ask you the rote question. As you know, in the new season, we started asking our guests, every one of them, what is the role of storytelling in culture? I think you already answered that on on your last appearance. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to throw you a little bit of a curveball, monkey wrench, something like
Ooh,
that.
ooh, okay.
And I think you'll have plenty to say on it. The simple question is, what makes you, René Urbanovich, what makes you a writer?
Well, that is interesting because we kind of started off. Isn't that funny? We started off talking about I want to be buried with my writing.
Mm.
What makes me a writer? I wish I could answer that.
No, no. All right.
It just is. At the end of Creativity Conundrum, when I wrote about the theories of creativity and the methodology I gave the creative process and all of the heady stuff. At the very end, it kind of concludes with there's an isness
Mm.
to creativity, which I stole from this artist gal named
Mhm.
Carrie Ng.
Mm.
So there's an isness to me being a writer, and I have quit and a, a thousand times. I never want to write again. The relationship I have with writing has been tumultuous, and because I have so many other things in my life, but they all take me away from my writing. Everything comes back down to my writing, and so the thing that makes me a writer is
You write because you are.
I have to.
What is it?
How do I know what I think if I don't see it in my writing? If I don't write it down, that's
Yeah.
somebody famous said that. But also something I read during NaNoWriMo in 2022, and I printed it up and glued it on the wall. Was there's only one thing harder than writing, not writing.
Yeah, you've said actually maybe on this podcast yeah, we did. We joked about like you think you're done, you think you've said everything you've got to say, or you're so fed up with the world, you're like, why would I put anything out there? I don't care to influence. And then, but you just can't not do it. I think that's what you said. You just can't not.
Can't not. So I often get second wins. So since I'm a writer, I guess. So I started out writing just poetry and stories. In sixth grade, I would write little stories and poetry. And then I started taking my writing very seriously and became a songwriter and saved and scrounged and scraped up money to record things, put on shows. And so the songwriting thing was super easy because I had kids, right? And I was busy working. And so songs are little, right? And you can work on them in the car, like da 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 da, da, and at the grocery store. So it worked out great to be a songwriter. And then I gave myself permission to be a real writer after I went and got my master's degree in literature. Now, I'm a voice teacher by trade, and I should have probably gotten my bachelor's and my master's in voice dysfunction because this is how I make my money. And I wanted creativity because I was obsessed with creativity and write and literature. So I was able to do that, and that made me it gave me permission to be the writer that I am today. And being in college as a 40-year-old taught me the thing we call follow through that I didn't have. That's why songwriting fit me fine, because you can have 100 unfinished songs as long as you have 100 finished songs. It doesn't matter. But putting 100 pages of writing together on a false start novel, that doesn't feel so whimsical.
Right.
So as far as writing goes, what makes me a writer is this urge, this need, this compelling thing in me. I absolutely have to write. And when I don't, I'm dysregulated.
Well, I would say, creatively express yourself. You'll languish if you don't express yourself. But yeah, if it's specific to writing, I think you evolved into that. I mean, would you have said back when you were a songwriter? I do remember once you said, you know what? Writing a commercial song is way harder than writing, something more experimental.
Exactly. Yeah. To try and appeal to the masses with your art. Oh.
But I wondered if you equated it with storytelling, or if the literary realm, if you equated songwriting with storytelling.
I do now, and at the time it was true self-expression, but I did have story songs that had points and messages. I wouldn't say that they were, prescriptive, because at first
right.
I wrote a lot of Christian songs, and I kind of grew out of wanting to prescribe stuff to people, and I wanted to be more of the artist that sees beauty in the world. Once I studied creativity and Schopenhauer and John Keats as a poet, and I really immersed myself in more art rather than like religion, and that really helped me find my voice as a writer.
Oh, that was a big pivotal point for you, yeah.
Yeah, very.
It was interesting that you had compartmentalized it that way in the first place, if that makes sense. The two being at odds with one another, but it does make perfect sense. On another episode, right? That's. But I remember that was hugely pivotal for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I said when I was very new at Christianity and very steeped in it was Shakespeare's going to burn. I used to always say that. Like, I was obsessed with Shakespeare. I was obsessed with the arts. Look at our mom, right? And then when I got saved, I thought you couldn't ever sing a secular song again. I was confused by fundamentalism, not understanding.
Yeah, I do wonder. I guess it's the messaging, it's the dogma of the church, without throwing anyone under the bus. But we do have a family member. Like, I was raised. Yes, I went to art school. When you talk about learning, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but executive function, follow through, juggling projects, seeing them through to the finish line. I'm sorry, Art Center taught me to juggle things. You remember I used to stay up till 3 a.m. because I had to finish the painting?
Hell yeah.
So Art Center actually taught me, nope, leave it on the back burner, juggle them all, and you'll get back to it. And it taught me a lot of discipline, right? And to draw on my craft instead of it having to have all my ducks in a row to be able to draw on my creativity. Anyway, school is awesome, but it also really puts you in touch with who you are. So I'm sorry, call it progressive, call it liberal. Call it brainwashing, but art schools at the time were teaching conceptual thinking. There was a lot of indicators of what does artistic merit look like versus commerciality. All those tropes were very much, I guess, ingrained in me. So flash forward 30 years, a family member, I'm so tempted to say it, but a family member, I just said something about the Renaissance. I said, yeah, well, that was when we re-embraced our humanity, Yeah. And everyone in my world understands that, maybe we don't even call it the Dark Ages anymore, right? But in medieval times, we were taught we're faulted creatures, we're grotesque, we're in need of redemption, and it's called fire and brimstone. And doesn't everybody know this? And that the Renaissance was where, we are not faulted creatures. We have immense potential and capacity. Let's embrace our divinity. And you saw it in every aspect of life, not
humanism.
Just the artwork.
Yeah, humanism.
Right. The complete, like you're saying, no, Shakespeare will burn. It was literally like, what? This person had never heard that. And they thought the Enlightenment, do you know what I mean, was like when we were on the right track. Completely flopped.
Yeah. Yeah, they were, I mean, I'm not a history buff, but The plague and the dark ages. I used to teach humanities to the arts, and I made my students stand up and read a list of every single friend that they've ever had. And they all stood up, and we turned the lights off, and then they had to realize they were all killed in the plague. Like, it was dark. It was dark. And there was a lot of, war and feudalism and just it was dark. And
Mhm.
so for certain people to want to come out of that and come out of the religious oppression,
Mhm, mhm.
that is when Mother Mary was born. Mother Mary
Mm,
was born during then because we needed her during the Dark Ages. We needed a loving,
mhm.
um, a loving goddess to be there for us. And that's Dr. Leonard Shlain. I didn't make that up.
Well, no, I was going to say that's the perfect transition to the book, actually, is, you know, I would say what we're talking about here is the stories we tell ourselves, right? As
Mhm.
humans, like we told ourselves we were faulted and in need of redemption. And now we're telling ourselves, you know what? We have divinity within. And I love that it maybe was the beginning of a shift away from patriarchy. I don't know.
Mhm.
But I do think because there's such a strong theme, I mean, I'm really understating the matter of that through line, of not just womanhood, but mothering.
Yeah, mother.
So yeah, without going too far down that road, let's read the synopsis to your latest work, which is, shall I say it or do you want to say it?
Do you want me to read it or do you want to read it?
No, Dreaming Cima is the point.
Oh,
Your latest work, comma, Dreaming Cima and the Abandoned Mind.
and the abandoned mind. Yep.
Okay, and so we won't exactly analyze that double entendre yet, but yeah, go ahead. Oh, I can read it if you like. It's up to you.
You choose.
Okay, here I go.
Okay.
Dreaming Cima and the Abandoned Mind is a literary autofiction memoir that traces the legacy of the Ray family, miners, homesteaders, and quiet survivors. I love that. Through the Mojave Desert's shifting sands and the female line that held the family together. The story begins in the courtroom in 2023, where René Urbanovich and her family fight for a mining patent that has been stalled for 30 years. The legal language is cold and clinical, a stark contrast to the desert that raised her. Overwhelmed, she hums under her breath, the same way her grandmother Faye once did. From this moment, the book unfolds in alternating vignettes. Faye's grounded and lyrical, showing a woman who never stopped adjusting, and Renee's increasingly fragmented and introspective, revealing a woman who can no longer keep pace without unraveling. The Cima Cinder Mine was staked in 1948, but it was the Mojave phone booth, installed by Emerson for mining logistics, that changed everything. The booth became a phenomenon, drawing strangers from across the world, and in turn, drawing the government's attention. The mine was eventually seized under the California Desert Protection Act, its fate sealed not by abandonment, but by policy, politics, and the shifting power of preservation. Yet this is not just a story of the land, but of what is passed from grandmother to granddaughter. Not just the mine, but the instinct to serve, the weight of memory, and the quiet expectation that women will carry the family forward. Whether in the desert or in a Tehachapi kitchen, Renee sees herself in Faye, and in her mother Sharon, and in her own daughter Rosie. The cycle continues not of wealth or gold or land, but of resilience, of service, of a family that shows up, even when the world looks away. I love that. Wow, I've never really thought of it in these terms, but I'm liking this.
Okay.
As Renee begins to experience her own cognitive decline, hiding her hearing loss, her stutter, her lapses, the book becomes a meditation on what it means to lose your mind and still keep going. Her TEDx talk, meant to showcase her professional voice, becomes the platform where she finally speaks as a caregiver, not a lecturer. The words don't flow as they used to, but they still carry weight. The memoir closes with the younger generation, Renee's cousin Adam and cousins Robin and Michelle, taking over the legal fight for Cima. Renee, now a witness rather than a warrior, writes it all down. Thank you for that. She understands that legacy is not just what you own, but what you endure and what you hand forward without knowing. Dreaming Cima and the Abandoned Mind is for readers who recognize that the heart of a family is not in what it claims, but in who it remembers, especially the grandmothers. I love the way you use the word claims there, right?
Yeah, a little, for mining claims. Yeah, there's so many double entendres.
Like that. Yeah, I'm not saying it's very much in keeping with what I got out of the book. It's fascinating to hear it worded right
Hmm.
in a slightly different way than I did.
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is the real one yet. It's one of many. And it takes time to get the summary to really hit. So, but because it's so complex, I felt like I had to lay it out just a little bit and introduce what the whole book was about without giving any spoilers away.
Mhm,
But it's just so complex, and I just learned what autofiction was maybe 2 years ago.
mhm.
So
In terms of the creative license that is available,
yeah,
in contrast to strict memoir or narrative nonfiction, that sort of thing.
yeah. I always just thought creative narrative nonfiction was one thing, creative nonfiction or narrative nonfiction, and
Mhm.
then memoir. I didn't ever hear of autofiction.
It might. What year did it become coined, that term?
Well, I don't know, but the first, okay, so in my journey with this book here, um, I had two editors early on, Nev March and Jay Langley, and we did a lot of talking and discussing what it should be. And sometimes they said, "Well, just," they said something like, "Well, you need a scene here that tells that." And I'm like, "Well, I wasn't there."
Right.
And they said, "Well, you just make it up." And I'm like, "No, I want it to be a true story.
Right.
It's a memoir, and I want it to come from my grandpa's diary or
Mhm.
something called, what's it called? Like when my grandma passes a story on to me. I wanted everything to be straight from my mom's mouth, grandma's
Here,
mouth,
here's was hearsay the word?
hearsay, yeah,
Right.
or folklore. Like,
Oh, I see. Right. Right.
we've been hearing the story about grandpa's tooth in the burrow our whole
Right.
lives.
Right.
So I wanted it to be the stories that I knew, and then my memories, and
Mhm.
then whatever didn't happen, I would just fill it in with a sentence or two, but I wouldn't draw the whole scene up if I wasn't there.
Right. Right.
And so I didn't buy that. And then when I took a class on structure
Mhm.
from Madeline Dyer, who's published like 20 books. Um, and she's a great teacher, and so she introduced me, and whoever's in the class, but me especially, to autofiction.
Mhm.
So we did some research on it, and basically, if it's like Ocean Vuong, one of my favorite writers, wrote, "On Earth, we're briefly gorgeous," and that was probably, I don't know, 8 years ago.
He's been doing the rounds. Have you seen him late? You probably don't watch too much TV, but he's doing, I don't know what he's promoting, but he's in the media big time right now.
He wrote one more book, and so he's probably promoting that. But
Right.
his book was the closest thing to what I was trying to do. He told, but he called it a novel because 8 years ago there was no such thing as autofiction.
Hmm.
So it was clearly a memoir about
Hmm.
his mother and his grandmother. Clearly, it told their exact life stories, both of them. One scene was his mom's life story, and one scene was his grandma's life story, and one scene was his story, and it was all jumbled together in this big, poetic, amazing, experimental mess. But God, it was just such a good read, and I know you read it.
Yeah.
So that was as close as I could find, but they didn't call it autofiction. But I didn't want to call this I didn't want to call it, oh, this is a novel based on a true story. Because
Right.
I still held true that everything I put in there, I wanted to have happened.
Well, that's what I want to explore a little bit here, if you don't mind me interjecting. The reason I asked, like, what year autofiction was coined is because I believe. Do you remember the guy that went on Oprah and he made more of his battles with drug addiction than really existed? He made some shit up, put it that way.
Wally something. She's
Yeah,
come
and
undone. Yeah.
yeah, and she was called to the carpet for promoting him, and he was a liar. Well, that's maybe when narrative nonfiction came. Right, we began to carve out that niche.
Yeah.
Creative nonfiction. You get to embellish, right,
Yep.
and it excuses you legally and otherwise and ethically from
Yep.
speaking the truth. So I have heard you say everything in here is true. I love that because you're a. Be, sorry.
I'm sorry. I had to make a conversation happen from letters that were written to the family in the emails, the
Mhm.
legal stuff. So
Right.
I just created a conversation about what they put in the emails so that it would be literature.
Beautiful. And that's why you chose the collage format, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could weave all those elements together. It's really beautiful. We're going to get into all of that. I was kind of going to just press the issue and say, you have said it's all true. And I see that. I've read it. I've lived it. I've read it. And it is all true. I mean, I can't know exactly if you were sitting in that, upholstered chair at that precise moment, with that butterscotch candy in the dish on the table. Like, I can't know that, but I do know it's all true. When you took creative liberties, because autofiction allows you to do that, wasn't it just primarily the chronology? If you wanted something to be more impactful through juxtaposition, you might have played with chronology. That's kind of the only license you took. Is that right?
Yes. And then everywhere that I changed a date by 1 year or by something, I underlined it so I would remember this is made up. This is made up.
Yeah, I did notice like one or two of those, and I was like, "Wait a minute." But yeah, that anyway. But I know you, Renee, and you're so earnest and sincere and ethical in your writing. To the point, I've said it. Sorry if you've already heard it on this podcast many times. I've said, "Well, my sister might have been exposed to certain mindsets in college, and I won't name names, but I think you really romanticized truth telling in writing." And that you can sense a grain of untruth a mile away, especially in memoir.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a value of yours.
Well, that's what I learned when I finally started taking classes on memoir. And it was, Dr. Floyd Moose at College of
You said it, not me.
Yeah. And we would sit there and we would read other people's memoirs. And then instead of him, just shoving knowledge down our throats or, pouring it into our brains, he said, "Why did this speak to you?" And ultimately, every time as we analyzed memoirs, it was because you could taste the truth. It was true. So that was drummed into me that, not to embellish too much, because like even David Sedaris, I know as a memoirist, he's gotten in trouble a couple of times, right? Because he does tell the truth. And
with family members,
he really tells the truth. And he does write everything down when he gets home. And as do I. I write everything down the day it happens because I can't remember it. And then he turns it into a memoir later. And so he's a true memoirist. He really is. And
well, I would add to that, if you don't mind, though, I would add to that because, as you know, he was an influence of mine. And like reading Me Talk Pretty one day is pretty much what motivated me to start writing narrative nonfiction. And I would say these are long conversations, right? But everything's subjective. We all have our lenses. So you and I could tell the story of a given moment, like, I don't know, being in a windstorm and trying to put gas in a tank. And we did both try our hand at that one. But, my worldview and value system is going to make certain things jump out to me. And actually, one of my favorite films is Hillary and Jackie. Did you ever see that?
No.
It pretty much tells a story. Then midway through, it's kind of a no-no, but midway through backs up and retells the story through the other sister's point of view.
Ooh.
It's a fascinating experiment. And so I would say, David, if he embellishes, he has an active imagination. He's a kook. So I did that in my writing just for humor. I would characterize things a certain way and I would choose the words carefully. And of course, that creates a whole new subjective reality that might not align with somebody else's. Just the humor alone,
Right. And then, right.
Yeah. And even you read one about the trip back to New York with mom and dad and seeing Veronica. It was the Pocahontas opening. And you were surprised. You said, did that really happen? And I had to say, well, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but yes. But of course I made up the dialogue. I mean, certain things stick, but you just have to fabricate the exact conversation because who the fuck remembers? But the sentiment was right on the money and the things that shocked you were the truest.
Right. Well, yeah. And, in this book, I put in a couple of things that somebody else wrote and the editors wanted me to correct their writing. And I was like, no, that's the whole
voice. You mean like the
mistakes to make it easier to read. And I had a hard time with that. I'm like, no, I don't want to correct anybody's writing. But ultimately we just cut out whatever wasn't clear. So the editing cutting out things that weren't clear instead of just rewriting. I don't think that's fair if I'm putting in a letter by somebody else.
I see what you're saying. Right.
But
I loved, as a transition, I really loved how like Grandpa's writing complemented the more stark is my word, kind of minimal writing that is more contemporary of René's scenes. And so just all the writing styles really complemented one another. And there's so much to talk about here, René. So there's been about 12 transitions that I didn't jump on. But one thing you said in there is you almost defined great writing. And the word beauty came up. So I know you said one of your goals was to just write something beautiful.
Yeah.
So without giving you my full review of your book here and now, because this is not the time or place for that, I think you did exactly that. And the poetic is one way of putting it. The poetic voice just transported me personally to this nonlinear space, and it touches you. Sometimes I say my favorite stories are the ones that touch you and you don't know why. It's unexamined, but I say they touch you for your sheer humanity. But that can be like the affinity that you develop for a character without even realizing it. Just by virtue of spending time with them, you're invested. And so despite yourself, you're surprised that under the surface, you've developed this affinity and you're feeling things and you don't know why. This was more than just affinity for the characters. The sheer poetry of the desert imagery, for example, it's called aesthetics. And when I say I was moved because I'm human, it's because I have eyeballs and ears and other senses. Right? And this gift of life that now I'm getting real abstract here, but we have this gift of life and we have all these, right, sensory impressions. That is, I'm not about to define beauty, but there's a whole field called aesthetics for that reason. So I feel like your nonlinear chronology, even this, what do you call it? Collage format in which, you're getting an impression here and an impression there, and slowly, just in my experience reading it, slowly the puzzle pieces kind of lock together and you get a more vivid picture. But I think because it's presented in that nonlinear way, you kind of access parts of us that you wouldn't if it was extremely linear. Does that make sense? You're kind of feeling between the lines.
Yeah, and it's not like I'm a published author, who's published 20 books, like my editor, writing teacher coach who held my hand for 18 months. I'm not that, but I didn't want to do what the original editors wanted me to do, just tell the story and leave out the poetry, because the Grandma and Grandpa's story needs to be told. It's an amazing story, and I didn't want to do it. I started it when I was 30. It's something that's been nagging at me, but I had to do it because I wanted to share the things that made me feel the things that made me who I am. So I couldn't figure out how to combine their story with how I felt about being raised in the desert and how I felt towards my grandparents. And it all started when I became a grandma, and I heard the kid, everybody saying grandma, and I'm like, I'm grandma? So it was an overwhelming period, and I just started talking to grandma and writing to grandma, and that's when I started the book, like right when I became a grandma, because I felt such a responsibility. And actually, it started out with a letter to my grandson, who his name is Kike, and it was just, you'll never know what you're from, and I'm going to tell you. By the time you're 18, I'm going to be 70 or whatever, I did the math. And so it started out like that. And then I thought I have to do a grandmother book, but I still had to do Grandma and Grandpa's story. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't know how I was going to combine it. And I wanted to quit 1,000 times, as I said. And I cried a lot. I mean, I cried one day for 5 hours when I was told to take out the poetry. And I just felt like Clint Eastwood, Jim Urbanovich, my practical husband, was just like, well, Clint Eastwood makes movies for commercial benefit, and he does what the studios want him to do, and then he'll do something for fun, for his own soul and his own artistry another time. Just take this one and let it be that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I couldn't do it. My life force wasn't big enough at that period. And so I don't know. Now I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, you kind of answered one of my questions. Of course, because there's so much nuance and I am so familiar with the content, as I said, I was just going to play, 99% of interviewers who haven't read the fucking material. And I was just going to say, here are some cookie cutter rote questions that, I can ask an author about their process. And I think that's a great way of bringing listeners up to speed who might not know the backstory. But you did get, you spoke to one of those rote questions, which is what inspired your novel?
Okay.
But there's more to it, because I do think the letter to Kike was certainly a milestone or a turning point, maybe the impetus for writing this incarnation of the novel. But tell me, I know dating years back, there was a desire to tell Grandpa's stories through his letters. Wasn't there something about the legal battle years ago? Maybe an essay about Grandpa. So I feel like all these projects that were maybe in your arsenal but never saw the finish line came together. Is that fair to say?
That's exactly right. I took the book that I wrote when you read it when I was 30. I took the whole book that I wrote and I pulled from there. Now I'm 60. Do you think I would have remembered any of that had I not written it when I was 30?
Right.
You know, there were little vignettes, I call them, from when I was 5 and 4 that I remembered when I was 30. I would never have remembered that.
Right. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. And then I wrote an essay about Grandpa, and I got to read it on a documentary that got in there.
To tell me the name of that, if you Desert Diamonds or something about
Diamonds in the Desert. Right on.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Diamonds
Yeah, thank God. I feel like we are archivists, Renee, even though it's a subjective version of events. Thank God for us. I'm kidding. We are archivists of history, oral histories in some cases, you know?
You know, I felt like I had to then for the family, and now I had to do it for me. But this whole structure thing, so that's what inspired me becoming a grandma. Got my ass back in the chair, because after Creativity Conundrum, I said, I'll never write another book. So then I started writing this during NaNoWriMo, and I was just writing vignettes of how I felt about Cima. And I thought, after reading this book on structure, it was called Meander, Spiral, Explode by Allison something. And it was all about the kind of books that don't have the Aristotelian structure where climaxes and denouements. There's no rising action. It's just little vignettes, and then the reader puts it all together and has an experience, and everybody's will be different. And then I read a bunch. Like there's this lady Allie Smith, and if you get through one of her books, you want to give yourself a prize. I mean, it's dense and crazy weird. And some of her books, this last one that she published that I never got through, she let the printer print in any way. Like every chapter could be in any, so they have like 10 different books, let's say 10, maybe there's 5. They all have chapters in different orders, and who knows which one you're going to pick up.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fascinating experiment.
It was, I never got through it, to be honest. So
well,
I didn't want to go that crazy, but right. I knew that I didn't want to do, I didn't want to write a book. I wanted to write vignettes. But then once I got into Grandpa and Grandma's story again, I had to. And so we did the structure over and over and over. Literally, the last 18 months is when I wrote the book. And I've been working on it for over 5.5 years. So the first, however many years that is, or months, was structure. I kid you not.
Well, and you've said that's what made you cry regularly. So I just want to pursue this a little bit, because what you're describing exists in all formats and genres, all art forms. You have linear and you have nonlinear. And sometimes that equates with a commercial approach versus an artistic approach, right? So what is artistic merit? Well, it's completely personal and it doesn't have any fucking rules. So we call that in film, that's an experimental. That's an art film. That's an experimental film. Very, in the line, it's in the eye of the beholder sometimes, but it's a gamut from commercial, and that could incorporate the traditional Western storytelling structure and all the, the want and the need and the plot points and the conflict and the escalation and all those terms we learned in elementary. And then there's art. And so, it exists in all art forms. I've used Tori Amos as the example of, you don't know what the fuck she's talking about, and yet it resonates, and yet it resonates. So thank God she's got record labels that believe in her and her strong, loyal following. They know it's never going to be a top 10 hit or a number 1 hit, but it's called art for art's sake. Yeah. So my question to you is this, I think writing should be joyful. I mean, I think you can access darkness, of course. You can tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. It can be cathartic. You embrace the shadow in your process. But for me, I really value that it's joyful, that I'm not beating my head against a wall for structure or format or commercial concerns. Fuck that shit. Life is way too short. So I do wonder if you ever took an editor's advice that was more commercial, did you end up liking it more? Did you see, ooh, now it's going to impact readers emotionally, and that's called growth for me as a writer? I'm asking leading questions here, but sometimes when if it's not at the risk of my voice, if an editor makes a decision and I'm fighting it tooth and nail, and then I do it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad I did it. I just grew as a writer. When you get out of your comfort zone, even if your comfort zone is lofty, do you know what I mean? Like artistic merit or literary value or whatever, it's always growth when you get into uncomfortable territory. So after you beat your head against the wall about structure, were you glad you did it?
Well, it's exactly what you said. I agreed because I didn't want to. And then I went, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it exactly the commercial way because these people can help me get published. And these people know what they're talking about. These people make their living writing. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Couldn't do it.
Oh, so you never did take the advice?
Well, I tried. I wrote 180 pages and fucking threw it away.
Well, are they genre writers or do they consider themselves literary authors?
They were more commercial and they wanted to see the whole world know the story. It is a great story and they wanted the most people to read it as possible.
Right, but that's why I'm asking because it's a very clear division. It's called commercial fiction or literary fiction. And I think there's a melding for sure, you know. There's matters of degrees, but traditionally, right, it's kind of one or the other.
Well, and that's why there was a lot of I wouldn't have the book in my hand right now, 360 pages. I wouldn't have it in my hand right now if it wasn't for Jay Langley, who believed in it, and Nev March. I wouldn't have it because we spent tons of time on Zoom and they made me believe in the story and they really tried to help me get it in the kind of shape that would make it commercial. And I said I was going to do it and I tried and I finished the book. And I had moments where it was joyful, but I was fulfilling an assignment and trying to be a good growing. I was trying to grow.
Right.
But in the end, I thought if I look at this book that got published and it's on the shelf somewhere, and what if I even make money from this? This is not me.
I love it.
60 years old. I need to be me. So
that's the word I should have said earlier was authentic. You can't not be authentic. You don't have an inauthentic bone in your body. So I love that. And maybe that, what I'm saying is there's value in your challenges as an artist, right? And there's growth to be had. And so maybe your learning curve was, I need to be true to myself, whether it's voice or intention. Always need to be true to myself because, I don't want to have regrets later. I want to be able to live with myself if it gets out there, all of that.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is, obviously, I've been working on something like this, even though it was like germinating inside the dark where we didn't know it was going to be a baby or, I didn't know what it would be, but I've been working on it since I was, a young woman. And something this sacred to me, I had to make it more poetic for myself. I'm a poet. I couldn't throw the poetry out. I couldn't do it. So, but, my new editor, also as brilliant as she is and smart as she is, she liked everything. I'd go, what if I do it this way? And she'd go, yeah, I like it. And then I go, that's not working. What if I do it this way? She liked it all. And then she finally stopped me and said, you got to land on a structure so we can, get you going here. And so we finally landed on one. And I think I made it work. And then Jim Urbanovich read it and he's like, So I took all of his advice and I rearranged the vignettes and I tried to put some transitions in and I took out the full articles because I had full articles from the 40s and 50s. I had the full article and that's not literature. That's what I was told. Okay, you're right. I guess I was lazy, but I find it interesting to sit and read the whole article. Oh my God, did we really think this way? Are we kidding here? But so I had to then edit those, which was not unjoyful. So once I finally got the structure, it was joyful. But I ran out of gas so many times and thought, I don't need to finish it. I've had my fun. It's been fun.
Well, I do think maybe you can't put everything and the kitchen sink in there, right? So they call it killing your babies. So I do feel like maybe realizing, maybe that article belongs in the appendix and not the body of the story because it takes you out or it slows down escalation of the plot or one of those silly things.
Right.
There's some wisdom to that, and that's why we get feedback. You can't please all the people all the time, and that might not be your goal. I regularly say you could have an elitist goal of speaking to a few people that are cultured and educated and sophisticated, or you can say, I want to speak to the masses. It sounds very elitist, but you do have readership in mind. I don't know that there's any way around that. And so sometimes you get feedback so that you know if your intention is going to land with 5 people or, you know what I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was a bad thing that you left out, because it could really slow down the plot to include every single article. Or we talked about the Mojave phone booth letters that came in to Doc.
Yeah, the 2,300 words of just letters. Yeah, those are right. Going to go in the appendix. But like Jim even said, because, he's a professor and he corrects people's speeches and wants to know what's your intention, what's your thesis, how are you going to support that, what's your transition. He likes really clear-cut stuff. And he really likes the story too, but he really needed more from me. And there was a point where I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I have to do the way I see it. You're not my audience. And so he says, who is your audience? He always asks me, like, is this just for your family? And I'm like, hell to the no. My family knows the story. They don't need me to retell the same story that we've all been living. This is I wanted to write something beautiful, and I didn't want it to be my life's work, but it's coming, not to use the metaphor of the mine, but I'm mining the deepest jewels in my DNA, in my soul. It's so rich. So I had to enjoy it. And I know that because I read Ocean Vuong and Allie Smith and whatever her name is, who wrote The Chronology of Water. I mean, I read a lot of experimental stuff. I know that there's a very small niche audience that will like this, that happens to be a grandma or a mom or just somebody like, my first writing teacher, Floyd, who enjoys, women's literature because of the art. So I know it's
a boutique. Is that still a thing? A boutique book?
Maternally Yours, my first book, Maternally Ours, was a boutique book.
That's where I got the term from, yeah. Anyway, a niche, right? Maybe more niche, and it could be a literary niche. So I'm glad you were true to yourself, and the result is fucking amazing. So whoever it reaches, and I don't know that, they say in art you shouldn't concern yourself with outcome, meaning you shouldn't write for your listenership or your readership or whatever the art form is, but in a way, there's no way around it, right? You do think about who might be reading this later. And I think it's a huge concern. Is it to archive for the family? Is it meant to resonate with family? And even a David Sedaris, I've been burned by writing about real people, and you just always have to concern yourself with that. But I think you hit a balance on all of those fronts, just personally.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful, that's a great word. It's achingly beautiful. And for me, it's transformative. It was heavy. I mean, it was a very heavy reading experience, but I needed that. I needed a good cry, and it was very cathartic. So anyway, we're all kind of all over the place, maybe not, but in the interest of, again, catering to listeners who might not know as much as we do, one of my rote questions is, not just how did you approach these years of research, because we've kind of covered that, but were there any surprises in doing the research? We had an author called Tong Ge on, and you've talked a little bit about this too. Like one family member said, hey, you should include this. You didn't say anything about this anecdote or this folklore, this family folklore. And you can't include everybody's stories or please everybody all the time. But she did say, she struggled a little bit with telling the truth, her truth, with everybody else having opinions about how history went down.
Yeah.
So anyway, any surprises in your research and any surprises along the way as your story evolved? Because I know it did evolve.
Well, in the early days, when I was going through everything that Grandpa had, still in the same house from 30 years ago, and the entire living room was full of cardboard boxes. And so I chose to go through each cardboard box and buy an archival safe plastic box to put paper inside to keep the rat shit out. And when I was going through all of his writing and all of his journals, I did find some surprising stuff about him not talking to his brother. And I was completely devastated and crushed that someone in my family didn't speak to his brother, and that his brother...
For how long?
Oh God, 30 years. I don't know, forever. Like
until one of them died, obviously.
yeah. And so that kind of a personal surprise for me, I had to fight not to lose respect for. I mean, we worshipped Grandpa.
I know a lot of Grandpa's brothers and sisters, but there was one that wasn't talked about, right? There's always the one that's not talked about. And I did learn he was filthy rich. Mom actually asked him for a loan for her first car when her and dad first got married. And he had ties with that Seal Beach Club. Do you know that story?
No.
Oh, mom had a postcard of this amazing beach club that's not there anymore. Put it this way, there was a lot of money there. That's the one that's not talked about. And I call him Heathcliff because he's darker than the others and he looks like he wandered into the family photo. Is that the one you're talking about?
I'm pretty sure it was him. And basically, now that I'm a grown adult and I see Grandpa, he was such a character. He was a dreamer and he had all these ideas and, all these entrepreneurial things, but he didn't have the money to do it. So he borrowed from his brother and then he borrowed from his brother again. And then and of course his brother finally just was like, dude, we're done lending you dreamer money. So I can see that now. But when I was 30, I was horrified and I felt like my world came crashing down because we did worship Grandpa. And then to see some of the letters that were not kind to my grandpa and to see him as a person who might have had struggles and problems, that's, you spend your 20s learning that your parents are real humans and then you learn that your grandpa was a real human. So that was one of the surprises.
That they're dimensional, they're right.
Yeah, they're people. They're just, they're just not. Yeah. So then the other surprise would just be when I was researching like the atom bomb and I was reading, old articles and stuff because I'm not smart in the history department, but it was fun to go into the history of everything that's in that book. It's not just about mining. The mining is probably the least interesting to me, to be honest.
It's a great metaphor, though. It's such a metaphor. Anyway, go on.
It is. So anyway, those were my surprises. Just like how we as a collective viewed certain things. Like even I didn't understand the difference between Republicans and Democrats up until 3 years ago. And I'm just learning now. And you helped me understand that it's called a bait and switch. So I was learning, the government was there for you in the beginning, and then the government turned on them.
Yeah, well, I would say the platforms have completely flopped, right? Grandma and Grandpa were Democrats.
Right.
And actually everything is backwards now. So let's not get too into that, but the platforms changed. And so, yes, the world changed. It was a bait and switch in that homesteading was encouraged, right? Yeah. And by the letter of the law, if you went and staked those claims and you kept them current, they encouraged the westward movement, right? And they had something to gain from it. Yeah. The moment, the conspiracy theorists in our family would say that the moment they wanted to hoard the resources for themselves, oops, we didn't mean that. Swipe of the pen.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by the bait and switch?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. And you're right. Everyone was a Democrat. Now they're not all Democrats anymore. They're like Republican. And so for me, I had to say, how can I tell a story that is not political? Because I don't want certain ecologists coming after me saying, well, of course you shouldn't rape the earth, right? I don't want that. My girlfriend, Andrea, her daughter is a lawyer in that era, the ecology, and in the earth and in resources. And I didn't want to touch that. So
there are, on this podcast, we say there are human issues that transcend politics, period. Humanistic values that transcend politics. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And I was thinking, if this was written by a journalist, like who was into journalism and wanted to do all the secret interviewing and all the research, they'd have a field day with, the politicians that stalled, like Barbara Boxer and her husband and Mary Martin. A real journalist would have a field day with this. But I told myself my audience is going to be moms and grandmas like me that are going to skip over anything that gets too over their head because I skip over that shit too. So,
but there is a strong, sorry to interrupt you, but I do think there's, the David and Goliath image in court. For me, there was a strong theme of injustice. And then I realized, but it's kind of metaphorical for just being robbed of your legacy. Everything life takes things from you. And
Exactly.
what do you do with that? You
Right.
know?
But if I had gone too journalistic with it and made it like a kind of like a murder mystery, a whodunit, and
Different
then
readership entirely.
I
Yeah.
could have done that because and I could have taken a side, like whatever, who cares? But there's so much about the Mojave phone booth and about the mine for someone to go crazy with, and that's why the story is so interesting. And there's something called in Aristotle's tragedies. It starts with a P, like peripetis or something, where it's tragic irony, where the one thing that brought them fame is the one thing that destroyed them. It's just amazing that this really happened. You can't make that shit up. It really happened. And so I wanted to do the literary thing with that, and then have the hero, and then the tragedy, and I wanted all of it. But I didn't want to get too into the like the journalist would.
No, I got you, and I think you have a great balance because it is intriguing. You can't make that shit up, and I think the reader, whether they're immersed in politics or not, whether they know, do you know what I mean, precious metal from tin or aluminum, they know nothing about mining. You tell us just enough to intrigue and kind of, my feathers kind of ruffled a little bit. And so that is intrigue. But more importantly, life is amazing and it's inherently symbolic. That's why I'm a storyteller. There's so much symbolism around us all day, every day. So you read it and you're like, oh my God, I never really made the connection that Bobby and mom, and probably at least one other sibling, did end up with cancer.
Yeah.
Did she have cancer? Okay.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God. And it's right there. That's a historical cautionary tale right there.
Yeah.
So many things. When you juxtapose it with history, whether it's typhoid, right, or polio, which two of the characters went through, you really align it with his history in a way where you go, life is amazing. And our micro reflects our macro thematically always. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. And in fact, you had asked me what my surprises were. I think that that's what just made it all so crazy and surprising, is all the metaphors and how you can't make this up. And I was just surprised. I would be up like at midnight, just sitting there crying. Like, what did I just find here? Can you, like when you were reading it? And that's what I wanted to get there, because I wanted to get it in the book that this is 100 years we're talking about, from 1920 to 2023. It's 103 years, and look how the culture has changed and how we view things. So I'm glad you got it. You hit everything that I was insecure about. You spoke to everything each time that you would send me your feedback. I was so relieved, because I knew that everything had a function and a reason, but I didn't know if somebody was going to get that or go, why the hell is this in there?
No, I think it's really, what do you call it? Like, reductive to say, oh, it's life affirming. But that's kind of what we're talking about, right? I think great literature puts you in touch with the inherent meaning in life. And I feel like it did speak to me. I can't, it's going to be projection. I'm just like everybody else. I'm got my own worldviews and opinions, and I probably projected all over it. But I'm glad that I seem to be in line with your intention a little bit, And
you sure were. You totally validated all my doubts. And I mean, first of all, the first beta reader, my friend Floyd, he got through it in 4 days, because I just felt like nobody can read this. It's too much. I was just in a panic that it was too much. And no, it's not too much. You read it in 4 days. It was not a heavy journey. It was a great read. Don't worry. And then you read it and you got every single thing that I put in there that I was hoping would land. Every single thing. You didn't miss one thing. And so I feel like all that hard work in structuring, right, and in choosing the function of each scene. So as a writer who, how lonely writing is and how hard it is, I felt like, okay, all of that work was worth it. And so it did all come together. I'm very proud of it. And
you should be. And I do think the hard work, we don't see it. That's the beauty. So again, the nonlinear presentation. I did go back. Okay, you and I know each other so well. We try to put on another hat and go, I'm going to try to read this objectively like a viewer who doesn't know René like the back of my hand, right? We both are pretty good at that. And so I did that on first read. And I, again, don't even want to be analytical. I just want to experience the story. Later, as you said, you reread The Secret and you're like, oh, now I see, that was happening in his life. And that's why he wrote that. It wasn't so much the case for me, but I did go back and really appreciate your strategic structure because I experienced it in such a non-linear, impressionistic way that, like I said, accessed parts of me that were unexamined. But then you're like, she's a fucking genius because it's all by design. And yes, with some coaching, but I do think a little bit of information there. Good. And then the next scene, whether it's a letter or I loved the imagined conversations with the matriarch, your grandmother. I loved those imagined conversations. But even, as you know, I sent you my breakdown of the structure for the first chapter. I couldn't do that for the whole book, but I was pretty sure that my hunches were correct. And whether it was examined or unexamined on your part even, I was like, ooh, she dropped this bit of information here. Then, wow, magically or strategically, who the hell knows, she then dropped this. And we're subconsciously connecting the dots, and the groundwork is being laid for a huge emotional payoff. Now, it sounds so commercial when I say this.
No. In fact, that's what I wanted. I wanted a huge emotional payoff, and I didn't want everybody to have to muddle through confusion. It is hard. If you're not a literature person, of course it's going to be like, what's going on here? But when you just read it and you let it all fall into place, and then you, like you said earlier, the puzzle pieces kind of come together. And so for structure alone, it would be worth reading. And, the first book I wrote, I wanted it to be for college courses for women's studies because I collaged the hell out of that one.
Silence Broken, right?
Yeah, Silence Broken. It's all about, women's rights and abortion and forced motherhood, voluntary motherhood.
Very relevant right now, by the way. Very relevant.
Yeah. And so I wanted it to be studied. And so I feel like as a literature person, if someone can get through it and feel emotionally connected to their own legacy and their own humanity, that's good. But for structure, it can be studied. You gave me confidence in that because we worked hard on this. We did. But
the beauty is you don't see all the hard work behind the scenes.
Good. And that's what I learned too. That there's a saying that says hard writing makes easy reading.
I love that. I love it.
Is it Hemingway? I don't know. I don't remember.
But I will say it's very different than Silence Broken. The voice, the technique, the voice, the format, all of it is very different.
Super different. Yeah. Yeah. So, and as I was going to say earlier, I don't know, an hour ago, a long time ago, I said, it's not like I've published 20 books. And my point in that is you're allowed to break the rules after you've followed them a good long time. Like if I had 8 novels, fiction, literary novels under my belt, then I would absolutely go, let's just do whatever the hell you want with this. But I don't. And so I've only really written one big short, like a novelette, and one novel. And the other book is a nonfiction, and the other book is memoir, and the other book is poetry, and the other book is short story collection. So I've never really earned the right to break all the rules. And so, but I felt like I had to put Grandpa's writing in there. I had to.
I want to, a lot of our listeners are writers, or we imagine they are, or creatives, certainly creatives. And as we know, there's so many parallels in all the different genres and formats of expression. And so I'm glad we're getting into this writer's perspective a little bit. I think it'll be of value to some people. But for me, what I hear is like, there's garage bands that hardly know how to play the instrument that they pick up, and they make it big. And it's so raw, right, that it doesn't even, the rules don't apply because they were meant to express themselves for the benefit of everybody else. And you can't even have a conversation about technique. And then there's people that, school fucks them up, like maybe they had a real direct talent for one thing, and maybe a real desire to express themselves and an innate understanding of what it serves the collective, blah, blah, blah. But then you get confused in school when all these rules are imposed on you.
Yeah.
Then one hopes the rules become second nature and you just tap back into that desire to express yourself that you had initially.
Right.
Somewhere in there, so like an Ocean Vuong, he was pretty young, right, when he wrote that novel.
Yeah, I want to say 21. I don't know.
So I just say thank God for all of it. There's people that get completely stifled by technique or academics, and then they finally find their voice after all that mileage you're talking about, right? You only get to break the rules once you've applied them or observed them. Maybe not. Maybe right. There's people that just come straight out the gate with a rawness, and it's a gift to everybody else, and they probably shouldn't go to school.
Yeah. It's funny because now Ocean Vuong teaches at the top colleges. Yeah.
And he articulates his process very much. It may not be commercial, but he can articulate it.
Yeah, and I bet he's a really good teacher because he could only be true to himself. So that's what I learned to do on this, is just to be true to my own vision. If nobody else wants to read it, I'm pleased with it.
Well, that's what I was hearing, though. Like, you are prolific. You write a lot. You've done the work, but you're precious about what you put out there. Does that make sense? Like, the work is all there. You get to break the rules, but you haven't squandered anything. You've been authentic all the way along. And so the work is behind the scenes, in my opinion.
Well, it would be fun to be a writer that could write commercially and make money. That would be nice, but that's not me. I can't do it.
Well, I'm just saying the mileage is there. You're prolific. There's a lot of mileage, but you don't squander it by writing pulp. You're very precious about what you feel represents you. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely off base.
Well, I think it's because no, you're not. You're absolutely right. And when I finally am inspired and I have that calling, I hate to be geeky about it, but I have a calling. I have to do it. I would not give this up. I have to finish it. And to be honest, I had back surgery in 2016 from compressed bulging discs. And so the last 3 weeks, I would not get up. I just kept writing, and my back is out again because I sat for 3 weeks to finish, and now my back is mad at me. But I'm gonna be fine. But that's how. And I don't have ADHD, and I don't have ADD, and I don't have OCD. But I just had to finish it because I wanted to move on. And now I'm looking back, and you read it, and I just feel like I've done that whole creative circle. I got some feedback. I followed the inspiration, and then I just used my skill for execution. And I didn't squander anything, as you said, because I'm so limited. The hours that I spend writing are limited most of the time. Obviously, the 3 weeks that I spent writing, I had some time, but most of the time I don't.
Well, which leads me to, if you feel like you've completed that circuit, what are your plans for it? You said it's not necessarily for family, that there's some value to the collective, not putting words in your mouth. Do you have distinct plans for it, or just going to let it land as it lands?
Well, I have hopes for it. I feel like I didn't go into the full caregiver mode, but I feel like the book is a nod to caregivers. And they're the unsung heroes of everybody's end of life. So I looked it up, and there's a few books already, memoir as well as creative nonfiction, as well as just stories. And Allie Smith had one where the guy was in the rehab, and the young woman came to visit him all the time, and you got from his perspective he was he had dementia, and she would write entire chapters of his dementia and where he was going and what he was doing, and he was on an island, and it was crazy. So there are books out there, but I felt like this gave it some feet, some legs. And so I would like for it to be published with a small publisher. And, they could make a Netflix series out of it, to be honest. It is a great story. I didn't make it up. I did not make it up. But if it ever got any eyeballs on it and somebody felt like this could be a great series for Netflix, they could do it. And who's more interesting than Faye and Emerson?
Yeah, there's a lot of characters in this book that you can't make up, right? The desert rats, a lot of the desert rats. And
right.
Anyway, you kind of answered two questions there, because my other question was, without issuing any spoilers, what is the main takeaway? So I love that it's an ode to caretakers because, as you know, we've talked about the salt of the earth. Like, it is a gift. Yeah. And I've had my own experience, and I've said regularly, doctors treat, nurses heal. It's such a gift. But I will say that was the heaviest part of the reading, was really getting the nitty gritty, the daily grind of what you were put through. Do you want to talk a little bit about the caregiving? I don't know if we, in the interest of keeping everybody up to speed, we might have to do another episode on this because we didn't really get into many specifics. Can you talk about your experience of caregiving and maybe how it puts you in touch with legacy and a desire to document that legacy?
Sure. So basically, I'm telling the story that my grandma never told because she wasn't the type. So I'm telling her story, and it's because she slipped away already, and now my mom has dementia, and she's in bed. She's literally bedridden. And now I want to tell her story because I should have done it when she was alive and I didn't. And I'm slipping away. I'm getting older and I got some issues. So I feel this need to tell it. And so you get my literal diary entries of me taking care of my mom, which includes, diapers and stuff that
really hard to read, Renee. I knew it in theory, and I wondered if it was taking its toll on you, if you were finding the gift or the spiritual riches in such a grueling experience. But when I read it, I'm like, oh my God. And then you add dad's quirks into it. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe she didn't jump out the window.
Yeah.
It's really hard to read. Yeah.
Had I not had the babies I was also caregiving for them, I babysat like 3 days a week. So I was just in that sandwich, as you called it, the sandwich generation. And I would come home and I had a ton of support. I mean, everyone supported me in this house. Jim was so good to me. Everybody supported me. And I had the luxury of having 2 subcontractors cover my studio for me, and they did the work of paying for the caregivers. So it's not like I had to work extra hours to pay for the other caregivers. My subcontractors paid for them. So it was beautifully like that. But you're getting my literal journal entries and my poems about my mom and letting go. And so that goes through the whole story. And then I'm struggling with, I never wanted to be a caregiver. This is not me. This is not me. I don't want to do this. But I know as an artist and as a deeply spiritual person, there's got to be beauty in it. And I tell you, I couldn't find it until I finished the book that I found it. It took me a long time.
Well, that's the beauty, right? That's the catharsis we talk about when we say writing, you find a policy for your life, right? You find it by digging in the dirt and sifting through it. So I love that for you, life will continue to have challenges, but I feel like maybe you're closing a chapter.
Yeah.
But I do want to go into that a little more, the sandwich generation thing, because we do have to bring this to a close at some point. But that's maybe one area we can dive into a little bit. So when I read it, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think, in the notes that I provided you, we discussed it enough. I think I'm right. You didn't want to be a caregiver, and you addressed that in your TEDx talk. Like, this is my new shameful identity. There was some shame around it, actually.
Yeah.
But more to the point, I feel like I call it future regret mitigation. You did your duty as a good daughter, right? And sadly, it tends to fall on women. Eleni became the caretaker for her aging parents. And
hands down, it was all Eleni. That's right. No option. There's no conversation. Eleni had to care for them full time. Yeah.
Especially in certain ethnic cultures, it falls on the women. But anyway, so there's a huge theme of female socialization and that being a thread that's passed down. But more than that, I think here, the sandwich generation idea. I think your goal, you wanted to be as graceful about it as grandma, right? We all know she cared for her literally invalid mother. I'm using outdated terms, but her probably quadriplegic mother. And then literally, raised 5 kids, I think, 5 or 6. One that died. A lot of hardship, right? One that died, and then changed grandpa's diapers when it came his time. So her whole life was devoted to caregiving. Seemed like you wanted to honor that legacy and be just as graceful. She never complained. Our mom never complained, never. And so you found yourself, I've got regrets and resentments and complaints, and it's messy, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm letting you off the hook going, it's called the challenges of being all things to all people.
Yeah.
Being a woman in the world is very different than it was back then.
Yeah.
You got to balance the career and the family. Right. So to me, that was the major conflict, like what it is to be the matriarch. And I loved the parallel between caring for a child and caring for an aging parent.
Yeah.
That was throughout. Life is amazing.
It's amazing.
But anyway, do you want to talk to that theme a little bit about how the modern context makes the caregiving a little more complicated?
Yeah, and that's why you did give it such a good read, because I could, JJ could read it, and she knows me really well, and she's also a woman, and, she knows the life of, doing dishes and making dinner, and but you really got it. You gave it a really good read, because I probably only have 6 mentions in 360 pages of what you just said. The
regrets, in other words, or
the shame of being pissed off and bawling my eyes out on the way home and being disgusted by what I had to do and not having grace for my poor dad. And what is the matter with me? Am I just an elitist, white, privileged woman? Why can't I? And then as I pieced it all together, it's like, wait a minute here. Mom was retired when she took Grandpa in. She wasn't running a studio, and nor did she have grandchildren staying with her. Oh,
right.
And wait a minute. Times were different when Grandma was raising kids. Wait just a minute. So you can see that I have those epiphanies. So I do let myself off the hook a little bit. But I grappled with shame nonstop, that I couldn't handle it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not everywhere, but I think throughout juxtaposition implies that theme, right? Yeah. But then it also fits into the theme of the entire world has changed, right? So the bait and switch idea, and now the rules are flopped, and so I just think it keys into that idea that, society's always evolving, culture's evolving, humanity's evolving, and we just adapt,
Right, and that's the lichen on adaptive, and that actually came from a letter Grandpa wrote to whoever. He said, I found lichen, and I found out lichen can be asleep for 50 years or 5,000 years. We got to look at this. We could sell these things, and we could make money. And then when my my editor is from London, she lives in like the wet, green, fertile fields of the countryside in London. She knows nothing about the desert, about the Mojave, about any of this. She doesn't even know the history, because she wouldn't
know lichen if it bit her in the ass.
Right. Well, this is weird. She's 30, maybe between 30 and 35. She's young. So she also, she'd ask me things like, well, what did she ask the doctor when she went to the doctor? I go, nothing. She goes, what do you mean she didn't? I go, what are you? You think that in the 30s and 40s, people talked to their doctor and had a list of questions? No. You just did whatever the doctor told you, and you went home.
Yep.
No, there was no internet to look.
I was going to say, you can't go to Chat GPT and self-diagnose. Yeah.
No. So if your doctor said, go have a glass of wine when you're pregnant, you went home and had a glass of wine. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing is, she's really, really literarily genius, but she hasn't lived in California, let alone the desert, let alone in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. I mean, she's 30-something. Mm-hmm. So when she saw the lichen, she said, "Oh, I went to a workshop on lichen." I go, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah, that could be a theme." I go, "Really?"
Wow! Oh, that's amazing that she pointed that out to you. I did not know that.
And so, of course, it was already in the book, like 4 places. So I developed a theme out of it. Because
but that's the magic when I say the organicness of the creative process. Like, the universe hands you what's needed, right, at the precise moment, if you're organic about your creative process. But you just I want to pursue this a little bit. I don't know if there's time, but just the idea that the world changes, and we can't not look through our contemporary modern lens and project, like, why didn't she mistrust authority or ask the right questions of her doctor in a milieu where you just did what they told you? Like, I will say, though, you made Grandma more dimensional, and she did consider, I mean, this is a weird tangent, but she did consider, like, oh my God, should they really be looking at those mushroom clouds? It felt contemporary, like, oh my God, Grandma did. I'm going to give her a little more credit now.
Yeah.
And, when I learned, again, Lenny, since I've already thrown her under the bus, and I'm kidding, since I used her as an example, she wouldn't mind me saying this. Her parents were always seemingly very conservative Greek Orthodox from the old country, Mary Greek Orthodox. And she found out in her 40s, like, they actually weren't married. And, they had a shotgun wedding. They had their first child out of wedlock, then had a shotgun wedding. And just, they're more dimensional.
Yeah.
When I learned, I always thought mom was just kind of spiritually lazy. She would joke, like, if I ever took you guys to church for Easter, it probably would get struck by lightning. so I just thought mom and dad were kind of just spiritually lazy. Well, I found out she went head to head with our Italian grandmother and said, I will not baptize our first child Catholic.
Yep.
It was all by design. It was all calculated. I gave her so much more credit after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
you told me that story. Right.
Yeah, sorry to repeat.
No.
Our listeners haven't heard it. But when I was reading this, I did think, wow, grandma, of course, was a young lady at one time. Of course, she had thoughts and opinions that she wasn't allowed to voice, but it doesn't mean she didn't question things or think about them. So the nuclear context is just one example of that. Of course, she knew it wasn't right. So again, sorry for the tangent, but I read 12 Years a Slave. But we tend to be apologists. I think all of us tend to be apologists in that we go, well, they didn't know any better back then. Or, she was a product of her generation. How can we judge her through a modern lens? If she was complacent and maybe looked the other way at cheating in her marriage, how do we judge her? Because, it was a different time.
Yeah.
But after reading 12 Years a Slave, again, sorry for the tangent, but I walked away going, nope, everybody knew better than slavery. They were betraying themselves by looking the other way because for the almighty dollar, right?
Yeah.
And of course that's the case because eventually you had people do the right thing and you had abolition.
Right.
But it was so vivid, and it was written by somebody that was sold into slavery for 12 years, but already had writing skills and came out and wrote it. And it's so vivid, and it's not in archaic language. It felt like it was written yesterday.
Wow.
So that's why I walked away going, oh my God, you should. You walk away going, nope, everybody knew better and everybody was betraying themselves.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that means other than I liked that you humanized grandma, especially in the context of history and all the societal norms that would never fly today, because you rethink everything. You rethink all those stories.
Yep. Well, there was this thing that always happened between Madeline and I. Well, what was Faye thinking? I need more interiority from Faye as a character. I'm like, no, she didn't have any. Like, you have to give her more interiority. I'm like, she didn't have any.
She hummed, so she didn't have to formulate her thoughts, right?
But that's what caused me to go, okay, be a woman in the desert alone, be lonely, and be thinking like a 30-year-old or 25-year-old woman with 3 kids. Think about what grandma would say. And I did steal some things from you, like it's best not to talk about it. So a lot of those, what are they called? Aphorisms?
Affectations? Oh, I don't know.
Adages. What is it called?
Adages?
Adage. I'm so French. Adage.
Adagio.
A lot of those, like, can't be helped.
Like colloquial wisdoms. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she had a lot of those.
Yeah.
But I mean, but I think that's testament to the fact that I was able to dismiss her as less than deep, right?
Me too.
Through my lens.
Yeah.
But of course she's a thinker. We all, I don't know. It was easy for us to dismiss it through a modern lens.
Right.
And I do think both, since we're talking about it, they were so gracious and never complained because that's how they were socialized. And mom really valued the way she was raised. They all do.
Yeah.
To the point of having the Stockholm syndrome. Like even Marnay, being a little younger and growing up in the hippie generation, sometimes, and she's more progressive and more liberal than most of our family, but she so loves and adores her parents, and they're on such a pedestal that she'll hardly acknowledge alcoholism, for example, And I think mom so revered the way she was raised that in a very beautiful way, mom and grandma both wanted to make their children feel safe.
Yeah.
They couldn't live with themselves if they were anything less than the ideal mother, saying all the things at all the right times. I baked you a bundt cake. Do you know what I mean? Mom
Yeah,
did it
yeah,
all right.
yeah,
And I wanted more dimension. I wanted more humanism. I didn't want her to be my best friend. I knew that
yeah,
parents were parents, but I always kind of thought, ooh, why she's putting on the rose-colored glasses and baking the bundt cake and saying the right things. There's not much dimension to that. Does that make
yeah.
sense? And
Yeah, and yet then, after you suffer through this era where you think your mom might be superficial, then you find out that it was a spiritual practice that she had every day to wake up and say, I have to do today better than I did
mm-hmm.
yesterday. And she just really believed in the power of positive thinking. And she read, the Zen of Seeing, and she read, The Alchemist, and but she didn't brag about it. She didn't talk about it. She just lived it. And so,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Yep.
no, just and that's part of the regret that I had too, is judging her in her old age. And then you realize I judged her back when she couldn't sing, and I judged her when you just judge your mom. That's an archetype.
Yeah, the hubris of youth, right? The
Yeah, yeah.
hubris of youth. And in that, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but I remember at a family get together, somebody asked, it wasn't even an official game, it was just a conversation. And somebody says, well, do you feel like you're Christ-like or something like that? Do you feel like you walk the walk? Do you embody Christ? And everyone was trying to know their limits, right? And mom was the only one that raised their hand.
Yeah,
And a couple people scoffed, like literally, like again, the church would collapse if you went in there and you smoke and all these things,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But in the end, it's like, yeah, she walks the walk. She's the most Christ-like person I know, but it takes time to really see that. So anyway, I think your book does create some dimension in a good way. You might have had a little resistance, like, no, that's not Grandma's essence. She was more likely to hum and not think too deeply. But by humanizing her, you kind of put us in touch with our hubris, that we've got our lens. Every generation judges the former, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. You hit it. And if it weren't for Madeline, I probably wouldn't have gotten to show it. I would have to tell it. She was always saying, show, don't tell. She was, and so by giving her more interiority than I wanted to, then the reader can walk away with exactly what you're saying. Boy, have times changed.
Beautiful. Do you want to talk about lichen before we bring this to a close? Is there anything more to say? Maybe here's one we could end on. The mine is such a beautiful image, and you describe it as being epic. Like the first time we're introduced to Cima Cinder Mine, which is the title. You talk about it as being epic. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of a looming presence. And you say, but especially on my soul, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a huge element in the book. When we talk about this theme of legacy, and sometimes Grandpa's dreams seemed to be materialistic, right? It's the reward. It's the big reward at the end of the road. I think if you go to Cima Dome, just for our listeners, the whole horizon is huge. That's the most surreal thing about it to me, is the dome is so immense and it's not going to blow. There's been some myths that it's due to blow. Not really. Because the Cima, as you know, the Cima cones are separate from Cima Dome itself. But it's a trip. Even the Joshuas are sideways. So your whole in my experience, your equilibrium is skewed. So there's just this feeling of imminence, right? Imminence.
Imminence. Amen. I don't think I used that word. I'm going to put that in.
Oh, you're welcome to it. But anyway, so do you want to talk about the theme of legacy? Because to me, the whole takeaway was like, legacy isn't always what you think. But maybe he did value that very first poem from him, makes it clear he values sticking to the pursuit of the dream at all costs, even if it doesn't pan out. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Because it parallels René, the protagonist, the narrator's desire to leave a legacy as well.
Yes. Well, and that's the whole metaphor too, is I'm mining my memories and my soul and my heart for some kind of a jewel to help me, go on in my life, and to say, what is legacy? What am I leaving to my grandkids? And so the metaphor of mining people and Grandpa being surrounded when he's in bed for 3 years, being surrounded by all his people. The metaphor just never breaks down. It's from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, there's a lot there because loss plays into it too, right? The more we lose and the more we see, not just, I mean, you and I, we lost our childhood home. The pine tree's still there with a scar, right?
Yeah.
We lost all the strongholds of our childhood, you know. The 9 Mile Canyon house is just a foundation now.
Yeah.
The hotel burned down. Again, life is crazy. You can't make this shit up.
And that's why I had to tell it all, because I could have cut it all out and just made it about one thing. But Little Lake Hotel burned down. Dunhaven burned down. The Joshua Forest burned down. The house we grew up in was torn down, and the house that we spent the most time, Kennedy Meadows, was torn down. So it is a memoir or a book about loss and how we come through that loss and what legacy is still there when everything disintegrates. What is still there? That's what it's about.
It's haunting, yeah. Because then you go to Alzheimer's when you're stripped of your personality and everything that identifies you, that distinguishes you from, right, the rest of the, not to get too metaphysical, but the quantum plane, what's
Field,
it called?
yeah.
Field, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's haunting. Anyway, so it is about legacy in the face of loss. What remains? That it was in my little review. It's about what remains when everything's taken away.
Yes. And so I guess that's my takeaway, is just that things are going to come, things are going to go. There's a lot of loss. Grandma had a lot of loss. We've had a lot of loss. But how do we come through it? And what remains is that legacy of love.
Thank you. Yes.
Completely cliche. It's a legacy of love. And I didn't repeat that once or twice. It is probably 50 times.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was my main takeaway without reducing it. I thought, well, the legacy didn't pan out, but in the pursuit of it, therein lay the riches. That's and right. Thank God, Grandpa, and we didn't talk about this, but I saw dreamers and then really practical people that allowed the dreamers their luxury of dreaming. Yeah. But thank God they stuck to, right? People like Grandpa stuck to their guns because the family legacy created along the way and the love that exists. I mean, a lot of pieces are about the only thing that is lasting is love.
Right. Yeah.
Your memories, your affinity, your fondness for all of this,
Oh, it's so sad. I mean, just that one scene where I asked Grandpa, "You don't know who I am." Remember that scene? And he goes, "But I still feel so much love, and I don't know who you are." But
and it's true.
Yeah, and
that one was a surprise to me. I was like, "Whoa, that's powerful."
And I was young. That was before I became the menopausal, pushy Italian grandmother that I am today.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I love being privy to some of the things I didn't know and some of the private moments I couldn't have known about. And I will say with Mom, we all tried to put on a good face. And even, Fran, I have a friend that became paraplegic 20 years into our friendship. And now she's been paraplegic for about 20 years. And I always said, I'm just going to treat her the same. That's what she would want. Mm-hmm. And, so anyway, with Mom, I felt like I don't like to speaking to even Grandpa like a child. Like Connie's very good at treating him like a child, and I was never going to do that. Yeah. So with Mom, I felt like I'm taking my cues from her, just like her breast cancer ordeal 40 years ago or whatever, 35 years ago. Yeah. I'm going to take my cues from her. With the breast cancer, I thought, this doesn't feel like the after school specials. Where are those moments where we all feel our feelings? Yeah. She had such a positive attitude. It wasn't for me to turn into a weeping mess and say, but Mom, you're going to die. Right. I think we all had the strength that she had. So those opportunities just never come. Yeah. So with Mom, she loved when I'd bring Bowie, and every time, even if she probably didn't know who I was, she'd say, "Where's the beastie?" Yeah. And he would jump in the bed with her. She always remembered the beastie. So we're not the type of family to go, but Mom, do you remember me? What's my name, Mom? We weren't going to do that on video like people do. Yeah. So I don't know if that makes sense. So I never felt my feelings because I was putting on a good face for her and talking to her like an adult. Even if she told a wacky story, I wouldn't blink, do you know? Yeah. And you got a much more up close and personal experience with it all. But I will say this, all of that fell completely apart when it was the week that we all made our peace with her. Right. And Dad was, of course, when he gave her permission, that's when she finally went. Right. But I don't know if you have the same memory as I do. It seemed like all of us siblings on our own schedules. It wasn't the big kumbaya moment like it was with Grandpa, but we all made our peace privately. Yeah. That was the moment where I just couldn't hide my tears and I just fell apart and I let her see it. And I said things like, don't worry, you're free to go, don't worry about us, we'll be fine, you're free to go. And I gave her permission. But you may remember, it was in my tribute, not my eulogy, but my tribute. She said something almost like as lucid as what Grandpa said to you, but I feel the love.
Yeah,
and
said, yeah. Go ahead.
Do you remember what she said?
I'll find you.
Oh my God. I swear to God, it's from a movie. It is so surreal. I can't believe I said something like, but we'll see each other again or something, or I don't remember. I'll have to read the tribute. But I said, how will you know? How will you? She said, I'll find you. And I go, how will you know? And she goes, I know you. Mm-hmm. Like our souls know one another.
I love that so much. Yeah. Yep. And the last thing she said to me, her last words to you were, I'll find you. And her last words to me were, don't throw that away.
That's in the book, right?
Yes, it is.
That is awesome. Like, it should be a tribute to a hoarder.
Well,
okay.
in any
well,
case,
and you didn't throw it away. You made a book out of it. How about that?
And I did not. Yes. And if there are any listeners that want to become readers, then, maybe they'll find the same thing, their own humanity and how to get through loss and that little nod to caregiving and the legacy of love that is within every family, regardless what the circumstances are or what era it is.
Beautiful.
It's lasting.
Yes, I hope. Thank you. It's a real gift to the rest of us. So thank you. And everybody should be inspired to pick it up when it comes out.
Thank you for listening to my very intense process. And thank you for reading it. And thank you for having me on to just dialogue about it, because you know how you live it. It's just, you live it. It's been very helpful.
You got to enjoy it now that it's not, I wouldn't say you need to, it doesn't have a bow on it yet, but I feel like you get to enjoy the moment. It's a huge undertaking and a huge accomplishment. So enjoy the moment.
Thank you. And thank you for all your great feedback and for this little podcast where we could just,
go on forever.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
There could be a part 2 if there's themes we didn't get into, although you don't want to analyze it and we didn't want to issue any spoilers. So, but I feel like if there is more to talk about, we can do a part 2.
I'm always down. This is so great. I love you so much. Thank you.
Love you, Renee. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye. And to our listeners, remember, life is story, and we can get our hands in the clay, individually and collectively. We can write a new story. See you next time.
We want to take a moment to thank our wonderful listeners and supporters. Your continued support and sharing of our podcast helps us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please rate and review us on your favorite platform and share the podcast with friends and family. For more enriching conversations and insights, subscribe to Language of the Soul podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media and visit our Patreon website for the latest updates and exclusive content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining our Patreon community for exclusive content and donation options. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds.